Welcome back to Tactics Talk with Guido. I've got a review for you here of the WZ-111-1FT, the Tier 8 Chinese TD. It's a casemate TD. As we go through this review, I'll do it the same way I usually do. We'll talk about a general overview. We'll jump into the tech tree, see how that works with this line. We'll do a comparison between some of the tanks that are TDs in its tier. I'll show you my setup, and then we'll talk a little bit how I did, and after that I'll show you two or three examples of how to play this tank. So let's get started. For the general overview, the WZ-111-1FT is a pretty good assault TD, although it can do the sniper trick. The tanks before it, especially the Tier 5 and 6, really needed to stay hidden. The Tier 7 started to transition into more of the assault TD, and once you get to the Tier 8, the WZ-111, it does a lot better. And we'll talk a little bit about its armor layout and how that works for it in just a second. But you can see that it is fairly big, relatively low on the silhouette. You look at the UDs, obviously a very low silhouette tank. The AT is pretty close. Charioteer has a turret, but not very tall really for a turreted giant on the Scorpion. The ISU is a fairly similar size, similar design as well. And of course the Germans are quite tall on all three of their TDs that I'm showing you there. The Borsig, very small, very stealthy. You got the T-28 right there. And then we've got the prototype, which is quite tall. So you can see that it is roughly the same size as most of the TDs at Tier 8. And you can see that it is built on the WZ model. And we'll talk about the armor layout right now. You've got a pike nose, but you've got a very large lower front plate. So that is pretty easy to hit. This armor up here is not bad. I won't go through the numbers. I'm not too worried about that overall, but just know that it is a decent assault TD. You can trust the armor, but I wouldn't count on it. Let's put it that way. So while you're getting in there and getting in people's faces and doing some face hugging, it can give some troll bounces. So it's decent, but not amazing. And of course, the pike nose does have its own issues with coming around corners, although big TDs, casemate TDs especially, are difficult to come around corners. Let's move on to the tech tree portion. The tech tree on this line that goes up to the WZ-113GFT has been wholly made up, and I've discussed that several times on my earlier reviews of the Tier 5, 6, and 7. What you'll find is the crew is the same exact crew through the entire line, so you have 4 crew members. They all occupy the exact same spot. When you get to the Tier 8 WZ-111-1FT, we'll take a look at that here. Pretty standard. You've only got to grind through one module for the tracks, engine, and radio, and then there are 2 guns to go through. The stock gun is usable at 390 alpha with an okay penetration at 192, but 250 with gold. The middle gun is interesting. It gets to 440 damage, and the penetration jumps up considerably, but it's really shines with this 130 millimeter, doing 560, 271 average pen, and 340 with the gold. That's where this tank really starts to take off. But don't be too worried about the stock gun on this. It actually works out okay. Much better on the second gun, and the third gun is where you're really going to enjoy as far as the gun goes, being an assault TD with this kind of tank. So pretty simple as far as the tech tree goes. For the comparison, we're just going to use casemate TDs. You can see that I've got the WZ on the left, and then some of the tanks that are Tier 8, and I've put in one premium, which is kind of a similar tank, the WZ-121FT, which is the premium Chinese one. If you look at this, what's interesting about this tank is, and it's one of the few ones I found, that it doesn't have one single best-in-class number, which is denoted by these green numbers. Now, sometimes those are pretty lame. I mean, if you're the best in class on signal range, it doesn't really matter, but it is interesting that that sort of indicates this tank is a generalist overall, with a lean towards an assault TD because of its armor. Let's take a look at that. The damage at 560, and that's with the big gun. So what I have done here is I have a 100% cruise set up in here. I've taken all the equipment off, and they all have the top modules. Obviously, in the case of the premium, it already has top modules. So that's what the setup is here. No equipment, no cruise skills, 100% cruise. So 560 damage is up there towards the top. The only one that's better is the ISU, and it's got that kind of outlier gun with that 750 alpha. So the gun, when it's got the top tier gun, is quite nice. Close to best in class, and there's only that one outlier, as I said. Penetration is actually pretty nice at 271. The only tank that really has it is the Udes at 288. So you can see that this thing is really built around the gun. We'll talk about the armor in just a minute. Rate of fire is in the middle. The AT is the outlier with that little pew pew, but everything else is pretty close to what it is firing. Reload time's at 13 seconds. Close to the top with the ISU, even worse. So you do have to wait a while to get that 560 alpha downrange. Gun traverse speed, not a huge big deal. It works just fine. It does have 12 degrees right and left. And the tanks before it were pretty close to best in class, but once you get up to tier 8, you get some guys that have some really good azimuth. That AT-15, no kidding, 25 degrees to either side. So 12 is usable, though. It's not as miserable as, say, this 8 with the ISU, where you're continually resetting because you have to move your hull if you have any kind of line of sight from right to left to deal with. Aiming time is up there, not great. It's not at the top, but it does take a while to aim in with that big gun. Dispersion's okay at 35, right in the middle. There's the AT with his really precise little pew-pew gun. But what's interesting, one of the interesting things is that the average damage per minute, if you look across here, is pretty close to the rest of them. Not too bad. The AT is winning there, but it's only 300 more. There's no really ridiculous outliers as far as this group goes on damage per minute, so you are going to be able to put the pain down range pretty quick. Hit points, though, are low. Right down at the bottom as compared to most of the guys, or tied for worst in the case of the Udes, which is interesting that it actually has the same hit points as a very light tank like the Udes. The hull armor, 180, so pretty close to the top. Now you have a mixture in here with these casemate TDs. You've got some of those assault kind of TDs like the 30, the T28, maybe even the A2, AT-15 that have very thick armor, and then you've got the very light ones like the Udes and the ISU and the JP, which pretty much want to stay hidden. In the case of the premium over here, he's at 120, so a little bit less. But 180 is usable. It's got some interesting angles, as I discussed when we talked about the overview. So while the armor is not as good as, say, the T28 or on occasion the Ferdinand, and especially not as the AT-15, it can be taken into account when you're playing the game. When you decide to go assault mode, you have a reasonable expectation that your armor will hold up to a few shots. Let's just leave it at that. For the mobility, it is not very fast. Top speed of 35. So it does have some issues there. It's enough to get it going through a town, though, and use it as a assault TD. Just barely. Just barely. Traverse is decent. You'll have a hard time circling this with most lights and mediums unless they're very fast. And we'll come down to the concealment down here is okay at 16, not amazing. Obviously there's better. The Udes, of course, is top in class, a little stealthy, a ninja kind of guy. But even this premium over here is sitting at 23, where it sits at 16.7. Moving, not really a factor. Usually anyway. For the view range, 370, not amazing, right there in the middle. And I'm sure you're all happy to know that its signal range is 750. So what do we get out of this comparison? Well, it is a pretty good assault TD. It's a kind of a jack of all trades. It can do the sniper mission. It can flex to the assault mission. And that's pretty good actually for a casemate TD, because you want to be able to have a little bit of flexibility with your casemate TD if you can get it, so that you're not simply trying to lock down one of the corridors with no capability really of moving forward and doing anything. And while it's not amazing at moving forward and flexing, it can actually do it. So that's actually pretty good for a casemate TD. Let's look at my setup and I will talk about how I did. For my setup, you see that I don't have any crew in there because I've moved them up to the tier 9 and I didn't bother to build any more crews for the Chinese. I will note that I did have 6 cents for the entirety of running this tank when we get to the numbers just for SA, because I didn't have it for most of the review on the tier 7. Most of the battles I had on that one did not have the 6 cents cooking. But let's look at my setup first. Obviously I have all the top modules in here. I'm using the big gun with the large alpha, the 560 alpha. For the equipment that I'm using, I've got a large caliber gun rammer, vents, and enhanced gun laying drive. So this is set up for more of an assault TD kind of idea. If you are going to be more of a sniper, then obviously the camo and maybe the binocs, but I'd probably just take camo and vents to improve everything else. That is to taste to some extent. You'll notice that with the good pen, I only carried 4 heat and 1 HE. Probably 2 HE would be a better idea if you got some kind of cap reset thing in mind, potentially late game. But I only felt like I needed 4 HE, and the pen is pretty nice with the heat. Sorry, talking about heat. The pen is pretty nice with the gold heat round in there. If you really need to punch through a tier 10 or a heavily armored tier 9, that's a nice thing to have. But for all your tier 8s and your lighter skinned stuff at 9 and 10, this AP is probably going to do the trick. I carried a small repair kit, a small med kit, and a large fire extinguisher in here. I didn't find it to be prone to anything necessarily as far as ammo racks or fires. This obviously with the large fire extinguisher helped me out with keeping the fires down low. There would be an option potentially to carrying food in this thing if you wanted to improve some of its capability, but I've also read that people do have some trouble with it with ammo racking and potentially fires, that kind of thing. So think long and hard before you remove one of these things and put in food. I really don't think it's needed as far as food goes. Let's take a look at how I did on this real quick for the statistics. You'll see that I took 75 battles to unlock the next tank. I did have to go through both guns on this one, and I was able to free experience the rest of the modules, the other 3. As you remember, there were not very many to unlock. But the 2 guns were usable, or the 3 by the time I got done unlocking everything. So I wasn't bothered too much by that. That probably did have some effect on my damage caused to enemy vehicles, 1,991. When I got to the large gun, my DPG went up considerably. This was pretty low until I got the large gun going, so it really does shine with that large gun. 54.67, battle survived 45%, and my hit rate started to creep up with this tank. The accuracy was actually pretty good, especially with the larger gun, whereas it was very low with the earlier Chinese tanks. Damage ratio at 2.49, destruction at 2.41, and you'll see that the armor has gone up to 7.2. If we drop down to the, if you remember my other review on the tier 7, it was at 0.32, and the one before it at the tier 6 was at 0.03. So I discussed that these tanks want to be assault TDs down low, but they just don't have the armor to do it. It gets a little better, kind of a transition phase at tier 7, and by the time you get to the 8, that's a reasonable armor use efficiency, 0.72, to where you can start to think, hey, you know what, my armor is going to occasionally hold up for me and give me an advantage in certain situations. 911 on the average experience. I talked about the DPG, received 799. Assist, that's always, I'm going to say always, but is usually low for a TD. Depends on how you play it, I guess. 0.53 spotted, so yes, while I played an assault TD, I was not always the guy in front. And when I say assault TD, I don't mean the guy in front pushing first, but I'm talking about the guy a level back looking for the opportunity to exploit a weakness and then ram that big gun into their face and help break out from positions on the map. 1.32 vehicles destroyed is okay, not great. You can see I never really got a top gun in this. It got up to 5. I did get a mastery. I got several masteries towards the end. Once I got the big gun unlocked, I probably reeled off 3 or 4 in the last about 15 games or so. So, like I've said multiple times, once you get that big gun in this tank becomes quite fun. All right, let's move on to a couple of examples of gameplay. For the first battle, I wanted to show you an ace tanker with the stock gun. So I am running the 390 Alpha gun. You can see right there the 122 with 390 Alpha and only 192 on the pen. So it's a similar gun to the IS-6, the WZ-111, the 112, although its penetration is 192 basis instead of 172. And of course the gold round then is at 390, which is plenty, especially for this battle. You'll see that I do carry, when I was carrying the stock gun or the bottom tiered gun for the tier 8, I am carrying 8 heat because I think you need a little bit more in case you run into that tier 9 battle. But you can see that I've got a very permissive kind of game here. We're in a 3, 5, 7, but I'm top tier. One of the top tiers is an arty on each side, and then there's some TDs. So I'm going to show you some of the brawling capabilities of this. And again, this is permissive, I get that. I'm not going to run into anything really tough here as I come through. But I'm on fjords, and I am headed down here to the southwest corner down here. Now, when I looked at this and I analyzed it, I said, you know what, this is probably a pretty good assault TD map and a pretty good assault TD setup based on what they have. I don't suspect the Scorpion G will be on this corner, and I certainly don't expect the Yudes to be on this corner. The Scorpion's already proven that he's not. He's up there at about E4 right now. But I could see the T-29s and the two KV-3s and maybe some of the supporting casts come down to the corner. Although right now we're seeing that there's a KV-3 up top. So I'm just going to come around this corner. This is actually a pretty good spot right here, especially for a low tank like this. Those guys like to poke around that corner and try to take some shots. So I'm going to see if I can find one of them. There's one. Slight low roll, but I'll put 382 into the Scorpion G. And now I'm just going to keep on trucking. Now that I've pushed him back, I don't suspect he's going to come around that corner anytime soon and spot me. So I can now come up here. And right now I'm not very well supported, so I do need to be careful. Here's where you'll note that the depression's not great. It takes me a while to get up there, but I do get there, no problem. I am able to actually get a shot on him without completely coming up over top. But I am exposing my lower hull just a little bit. Now I've got a T-71 here. And unfortunately, one of my problems that I deal with constantly is I click the gold round, the number 2, and I leave it there. So I am using heat like crazy here, and I have no need to be doing it, unfortunately. Now the KV-3 I can use some heat for. It's unfortunate I've already used 5 of the rounds though. So I've got a Saint Emil KV-3. I do need to watch my lower plate here. You'll see the armor holds up right there as I come around the corner. Using this guy as a bit of armor. Trying to get this Saint Emil, put another shot into him, and back in this Tiger P is doing me no favors right here. There you go. So a little bit of angling in there, no problem. I'm able to get that shot in, and I'll put it into the lower plate of the KV-3, my last heat round. Saint Emil fires into me. He does pan, and I'm able to take him out. Thank goodness I'd run out of heat because I had a good chance of actually losing my heat on that guy's track. Now you'll see that the lower plate gets panned here because I have to come all the way around and really expose myself. It takes me a while to get lined up, but the 192 does go through the bottom of the KV-3 and we take him out. So that lower plate, lower front plate is vulnerable. While I was working on the corner, I was able to get a little more angle to him, even though I still had to come around and square up. But in that case right there, I had to, no kidding, come all the way around and square up. And he's able to put a shot into me. Now, I talked that this tank has some flexibility capability, and you'll see that I am getting on my horse a little bit here and moving back towards the battle. Most people in casemate TDs on this map will sit back here on this peninsula, or maybe push up into the middle hoping for shots across this big open area. But I wanted to show you this one assault TD wise for 2 reasons. Just to show you that the WZ can do that, and that casemate TDs in general can do it as well. But take into account the enemy situation, what the map is, what you're facing, and this was just a really good setup for me to go assault TD mode on. You'll see the 3001 and my other buddy over there that went around the corner, the Tiger P, they continue pushing in towards the cap, and that's just the wrong answer. The game is still pretty even. If they'd have turned back around and come with us, we'd have had our entire force here in the middle working together, moving up here to come up either behind the guys that are up in the north, east, or finish up these guys in the middle. But as it is, they've pushed down there and they're kind of out of the fight. It's a fairly common problem that you'll see people, once they win a flank, pushing straight through and going right for the enemy cap instead of actually looking at the mini-map and saying, all right, where is the next place I need to be? And the next place where you need to be is not necessarily going straight to the enemy cap just because there looks like there's an empty road to it. And I guarantee you that there's not going to be an empty road to it most of the time. Some of their team is either camping or they're going to come back. So I'm going to come down here because they've won the northeast, and I suspect there's going to be something come down here onto the cap. Initially I was going to push right there, but I don't want to get circled by a Cromwell coming raging down, or a 3001D, so I need a little standoff. So I'll just sit here and see what we can find. I do have an AT-7 moving up on my flank, and I say, all right, there we go. We'll get a shot on him. Blap. No. So nothing doing there. Maybe I can get him this time. Let's see. Where is he? No, well behind him. Just that one's just bad gunnery on my part. And backing up. I'm really expecting the 3001 to come down, but then I notice he's all the way back on cap, and I figure, you know what, we've got this guy isolated. I've got an AT-7 on myself. Let's just come in here and just be a big bully. come down here with my big gun, lay it on him, low roll him at 350, and I'll just ram kill him for the rest of his hit points right there. We'll go 2 times speed. It takes me a while to get around there. Initially thinking about coming up here and waiting for someone to come back, but by the time I counted noses and realized, oh, dopey, go back to their cap, that's where they all are. I sort of expected the T-29 to be there by about then, but he is AFK or MIA, let's put it that way, if not AFK. Coming around this corner then. Eventually I'll get up to real-time speed. And I am looking for that guy. He's hiding behind there in the 3001D. Take a blind shot into the bush. One of the dangers with the Casemate TD pushing into situations like this is getting circled, especially if there's multiple enemies and fast ones like the AMX-12T. If you take a shot and he notices you're on a reload, the AMX-12T will try to sneak around you while the other ones keep you busy to the front. If you turn to face the AMX, then the rest of them shoot in the side. If you don't turn to the AMX, then he gets behind you. Fortunately, the 3001 goes down, and we're still in kind of a battle right here. So I see this AMX-12T, but he's behind this building. I'm going to shoot that just to knock that building down so I have a shot at him next time he tries to be there. The reload is decent on this one, on the 390 Alpha gun. I get lucky here that he actually hits my gun. Hits my gun and doesn't hit my superstructure. More than likely he'd have pinned right there had he not actually hit my gun. So he tries to get back, but it does not work. And we got the AT jumping onto the cap, and initially I'm thinking I'm going to come up here, but I am definitely a one-shot to that Scorpion, so he can take me out. I'm just going to spin around right here, using the building in front of me as cover, and dive back down where the AT-7 is. So one of them is on the cap, on our cap, and that is probably the T-29, and that was a massive help, the T-12T crashing. And now all we've got is an artillery and the Scorpion G. And why the artillery didn't fire, I don't know, whether it was AFK. He hasn't been lit, and he's nowhere to be seen nearby here. So we just kind of got lucky. The 3001 is, sorry, the Tiger P is dopey and was looking backwards for some reason. I don't know what he was looking at. And the AT-7 is smart. He gets out of the way, and I can sit here now and wait. And we'll see if this... There we go. Scorpion tries to come around and get a shot, and I'm able to get a shot on him. Again, I'm not sure why the arty didn't hit us, whether he was completely out of position. Maybe he'd gone up the hill where the T-29 was or something like that. But ends up being 4,068, 2,500 blocks. So you can see the armor was pretty useful for me in that one. Able to drop a lot of damage even though I'm using the 390 Alpha gun right there. So a good example of how this tank can be used in more of an assault TD instead of a hide in the back TD. Let's move on to the next one. For the second example, I'm going to show you more of a traditional lock down the lane kind of gameplay with the Casemate TD. In addition to that, this is the 440 damage alpha damage gun, so the middle gun. Loaded into Corellia. You can see that I'm top tier. This is a pretty good setup for me. I'm going to make some very critical early mistakes here. So number one, I am going to squeeze myself in front of this T150, which I'm not very proud of. I probably shouldn't have done that. And I end up paying immediately for it. Bam, bam. Those guys fire fast, and my entire lower front plate is just sitting out there, and I am down to 225 hit points. So I have traded about 800 hit points just so I can get one shot in, and I'm still doing it, so very foolish. But the T-150 moves back, and now I'm getting into the position I should have been to begin with, where my lower front plate is much more covered up. And now you'll start to see some of the strengths of this tank. The accuracy is decent with that 440 Alpha gun. And now that I'm angled a little bit here, my lower front plate is not nearly as exposed as it was. I'll shoot right into his mantlet. And I have gone to heat, unfortunately, once again. I do not need to be doing that, especially against the guys I'm facing. And I'm just going to lock this down. So we're in pretty rough shape. We've lost quite a few tanks here. I've got a Ferdinand behind me who's keeping them honest as far as if they're going to turn around that corner. I drop another 461 onto the Tiger, and now I've got some guys that are feeling like they probably want to push around us. And had they just come, they might have had a better time of it. Had a Tiger back there with the stock turret. Put a shot on him, and you can see right here, as I'm able to hide my lower front plate, I have a much better time of it with this tank. That shot goes over top, unfortunately. They are pushing around the north side of the hill that I'm hiding behind, but we've got the Sturv back there, and pretty soon you're going to see the Ferdinand head back. I try to snipe this guy. Not quite. And we'll just keep working this alley. So a good example of this kind of TD with good armor, in the right position, not being foolish like I was at the beginning, and being very careful now with only 225 hit points. It would have been nice if I was careful beforehand. You'll see that it is quite effective in locking down these kinds of lanes, just based on it having enough armor to do so and a nice punchy gun. Even with the middle gun at 440, they definitely feel it when they get hit by it. We're still losing by a bit. The Ferdinand's had to react because the Sturv goes down, so the Ferdinand has to go deal with this Chi-Ri coming in behind us. Potentially Saint Emil. We do not want these guys to get in behind us. You'll see that I actually bounced the Scorpion G coming around with an angle right there. I'd really like to get rid of this Tiger 1 that's sitting back there. Kind of bait a shot and dive back. And the Scorpion makes a mistake. I make him pay for it, and we get him out. And that's really the gun that was the biggest problem. Now, this guy's got plenty of ability to take me down. So it was a good move on his part. Had he done that a little earlier, it might have made a difference. But I ammo rack him. Didn't really need it because I do 425. So it ensured the kill. However, with a decent roll on the Alpha, I would have killed him anyway. Now the Ferdinand's kind of pushing the Chi-Ri. So now I have a decision. Unfortunately, because it is a casemate, it's not very flexible on the push. So there is a Tiger back there somewhere, and there's a 5916. Now the last thing I want to do is let that 5916 get around behind me. So he's the guy I'm worried about. If I come pushing around that corner and he sees me and I'm not ready for him, I might not get a shot off before he gets behind me. And if I have to start spinning out in the open, now I've got the Tiger 1 to worry about. Ferdinand's got the Chi-Ri cornered. I've got 3 heavies out there probably trying to take shots on him right now, and holy cow, here comes this guy. And thank goodness I did not miss. That's the kind of timing I typically have. I come down the hill just as the TD comes around the corner. And there goes the Chi-Ri. So I'll make you watch the rest of it. I actually tracked down the Uds later up around D1, so I get a little bit more hit points out of it. I want to say about another 400, somewhere around 3,800 or so. Ends up being an ace tanker with the 440 Alpha gun. But you can see a more traditional lockdown a lane roll with some pretty serious mistakes to begin with. But the reason that's pretty cool with this tank is, like I said, the armor, while it's not going to save you every time, you can see that I got nailed in the lower front plate when I was foolish enough to show it. But later on, when I played the armor profile correctly, I was getting quite a few bounces out of those guys. That is the second example. We'll have one more, actually. We'll go, the next example will have the big gun on it. In this last example, I'll show you a game with the large gun, the 560 Alpha gun. You can see it right there, the 130 millimeter. We are again on Fjords, and I have again spawned on the east side, but instead of going down to the corner, I head up to the north. Just really quickly, if you look at our setup, they've got a 110E5 and a 110E4 against our 268 and a Bat Chat. And then some heavies in the middle. Patton works on down to some heavies at tier 8. So instead of going down to the punchy face corner down in the southwest, I decided to go up towards the top, being bottom tier in a 357. My initial idea is to be a bit of a sniper. I'll use this position up here and see if we can't get some lights down there. And I get quite a few good tanks lighting up, so let's see if we can get a shot on the Patton. No, not quite. And I got this IS-3 right here, and this guy becomes a bit of a problem for most of the game, as he has an uncanny ability to drive in front of me when I'm trying to shoot, which I don't think he's trying to do on purpose, but he just happens to do that. So we got a 54 E1 right here. We got quite a few tanks stacked up, and they have a bunch of their power down on the southwest corner. There's a T-28 in the middle. We've got our objects plugging up the middle. And the good news for our team is that we don't have a bunch of guys. In fact, we have nobody sitting on the sniper hill back there. So that's good. That means all of our guns are forward and attempting to get into the game, and that's fantastic. Got a JT here. I'm just firing regular AP. Take a shot, bounce off of him. Now we're getting a little beat up pushing in here, but we are now pressuring them on this side. There are a lot of guns left in the game, so this move right here could easily go south. In fact, there goes my platoon mate, Sovereign M. He ends up getting killed by the JT. And me and this IS-3 are attempting to use the same spot constantly. That's my fault for ramming into him. Now he's going to come out in front of me. I figured out, okay, so he's not going to do that, so he'll let me take this shot right here. So I'm aiming in. I'm about ready. Oh. So I'm glad I didn't pickle just a little bit earlier. Would end up shooting my buddy. And it would have been my fault, per the discussion I had in the tactics talk a while ago. So now the JT, this will be a kill. No, curveballs, a little slice to the right. And we're pushing in. So they've got a Patton there at least, and it turns out there's quite a few tanks there. There's the object, 261. He's got his sights set on the IS-3 or maybe the Bat Chat, but in any event, he doesn't shoot me for a wonder. And now I am basically switching from the sniper kind of idea into more of an assault gun idea. Because of the armor on this tank, then that is actually not a bad idea. A softer TD would not want to be doing this. This Patton would just eat it for lunch, as would the Tiger II. Now I do get pinned by the Patton on that one. And the IS-3 is trying to deal with him. Now he's side scraping there, and that doesn't really leave his casemate friend much maneuver room. So like I said, this guy has been really kind of nothing but in the way. He's tracked or something, or just sitting there, not sure, but I'll put a shot into the Patton, and he'll take the opportunity to take out the IS-3. And the good news now is, as annoying as the IS-3 has been, he is now my armor and my shield. I get a little aggressive pushing in here, and we have a M449 coming up, and I'm thinking, well, this is not the best situation here, because I've got the Tiger II, the Patton, which foolishly pokes out and lets me kill him. And now it's looking a lot better, but we still have two tanks with turrets and pretty good guns. I've got a Bat Chat 25T, which should be able to eat these guys for lunch. He takes out a 103. Not sure where that shot went. Either I completely missed or it went into the building there. Probably wasn't going to be a good chance of pinning anyway based on the angle. So here he comes again. He's going to give me a much better shot on that one. I'll take the lower plate that time. You can see even with the gun I've got, it's going to take a while to whittle this guy down. I just dropped 592 on him that time. And now we're waiting. So I've got a low, just really quickly here, this is worth a discussion. This low is hanging out behind these rocks back here. He's at 100%. He's doing his level best, it appears, to take on this M449, but he's not doing a really great job. The Bat Chat has scurried off, at least one of them. There's two of them, one tier 9 and one tier 10 type of Bat Chat. The one that was here is gone. And we get stuck right here. I'll let it go for now. We get stuck right here for quite a long time, trying to deal with these two. And to a large extent, it's because the low is not being very aggressive. And why exactly he's all the way out there on that island, I don't know. So if he'd have repoed, pushed forward, which is probably not a great idea because he'd be out in the open taking side shots, but if he'd have backed out of that and maybe come around, and I'm talking about over through this area right here and then come up on the edge here, he could have side scraped off this edge and start taking on the M4, because we need something to help break these guys down. If I move forward too much, I'm worried that the M449 will hit me in the side. And that's that inflexibility kind of idea for casemates. And right now I'm thinking, you know what, fine, I'm going to actually go low and I'm going to deal with this M449. Because I feel like I can push him better than I can push the Tiger II based on if the M449 sees me and hits me in the side while I'm trying to push the Tiger II. But the Bat Chat pushes the situation here. I'm thinking, kill. Nope. Nothing. Now the other bat chat is here. We lost the one that attempted to get in there, and I bounced that. And that was kind of a lucky bounce, and I'm able to put another 501 into him and bring him down to a one-shot. But there's that armor, and this tank will give you those kinds of bounces. And the good news is I've got this IS-3 here really to cover up my lower plate to a large extent and make it much harder to get a shot on me. And the low is still kind of just sitting there still. And our bat chat's attempting to take on this last guy with his last percentage. The other thing about this fight, the way it's going right now, we've started to win, but how the battle went on the rest of the map was going to be very important as to whether we could win this, because we don't have a great capability of pushing based on what the low is doing and the fact that I'm a casemate TD. We're lucky that the other side or the rest of the map won, otherwise we'd start getting surrounded or overmatched with too many tanks. So I'll just take the opportunity to push in. It was hard to see, but as soon as I lit up that M449, he started to turn towards me, and the bat chat took the opportunity to pop out and kill him, and the Tiger 2 takes him down. As I'm coming in here, I'm counting. As soon as that Tiger 2 fired, I started 1001, 1002, 1003, and you assume about 8-9 seconds for the Tiger reload, and that gives you a general idea of whether you're going to get there in time to take your shot before he shoots, because had he fired first, he had a good chance of taking me down. So I'm at 4,200 or so. Get a little edge of this guy here, backing out, find him finally, and we'll take him down. And that ends that with 4,700. Shows 0 bounced, which is actually interesting because I'm pretty sure I bounced a couple. Looks like a little bug there. 4 kills. So a good example of the large gun, the 560 Alpha. Again, more of an assault TD. Started with the sniper kind of action. Went to a spot that wasn't necessarily the brawling area because I was bottom tier in this case. And this thing's armor isn't going to stand up to tier 8s very well, or definitely to tier 10s. And then swung to more of an assault idea once we were able to sweep in from the north and come towards their cap. Pinned down a couple of their tier 8s over there. That was not played especially well by me, but eventually we got through it. And that low is still over on that island over there. I just noticed that. Alright guys, I hope this review helped you out with this tank. I really liked this for a casemate TD. The armor sort of did what it needed to do to make it an interesting tank as far as an assault TD goes. And once you get that big gun, it really starts to shine. So like I said, I hope this helps out. If you like what you saw, make sure you subscribe, and as always, we will see you.